If you've been watching the news and following this sort of thing, you'll know that around the world they're canceling Christmas, especially in the Middle East. And while I certainly understand they're wanting to be standing in solidarity with victims of violence around the world, we can't cancel Christmas. We certainly can downsize it, streamline it, get over some of the commercialization. But we need Christmas. We need Christmas in this time of violence. We need Christmas in this time of the world. And if you really understand the original story, you'll see why it's so important that we continue to celebrate, that we continue to remember. It's a radical story. It's an amazing story. It has a time, it was written for a terrible time. It was a bloody, dark, terrifying time of trauma and anguish and death when these stories were told originally. And the people who heard it over thousands of years ago, they faced the same crushing despair and horrifying massacres we see by occupying armies today. The people in the telling of these stories found hope and resistance and divine strength in the telling of them. And they became a light in the darkness, these stories and these songs, lighting the way to a better world. Story of radical resilience. It has all the characters that we're familiar with today. Teenage mothers, teenagers that were shepherds. Shepherds back then were delinquent teenagers that weren't really allowed to be near the villages, so they sent those mainly male out into the fields to watch the sheep. It has wise men. They weren't Jews included in this story. Oh, and it has the cosmos. We're made of stardust, so of course the ancients included the stars that we're made of in this story. And animals were the first witnesses to the birth of the Christ child. Oh, we need Christmas now more than ever. Friends of mine were saying that they weren't going to be able to sing, "Oh, Little Town of Bethlehem," until they rewrote some of the wordage so it doesn't seem as schmaltzy, I suppose, more realistic. Oh, but that's a powerful song. It was written by Reverend Phillips Brooks, a minister who had just seen the Civil War ravage this nation. And on a pilgrimage, he went to the town of Bethlehem. And he was so moved by the possibilities that this narrative stories told that he wrote that song and sent it back to his Sunday school children to be sung. These stories, you see, were told as a clue to what is possible with God's love. We can do all things with God's love. And that's what these stories helped us see, was the alternative vision that is there. It's always been there. It pops up in certain places to those with eyes that are willing to see it and hearts that are willing to hear it and be it. Until Christmas, Easter was the primary feast. Did you know that? For hundreds of years. And then St. Francis of Assisi entered the scene, and he rediscovered these early stories, and he told them in such a way that he launched the Christmas Feast of Incarnation. He said, our salvation history started with love, incarnate love. God so loved us and the flesh. And then Christmas became one of the major festivals, the one we certainly celebrate the most around the world. You see, St. Francis had realized that God became flesh. He took on materialism, and he took on physicalness, and he took on humanity. And he said, we don't have to wait for Good Friday. We can start living that out now. We must start living it out now. It makes sense to me that Christmas is a celebratory feast called love. And it's no wonder that incarnation has always been the heart of my understanding of the good news, the gospel. The Christmas tree and the Christmas creche. It's like I was taken to another world to view what the world was meant to be, where the foundation is love and where God is in everything, and it's universal and it's inclusive of all things and all animals. It's like I was seeing the real world inside of what everyone was living. The Feast of the Incarnation, when God, love, was born. I was thinking about what to preach this a couple weeks ago, and I was sitting there and I got a text, and I answered the text right away, and it was my younger brother telling me that my older brother in Florida had been taken to the hospital, and it didn't look good. 73. 30 minutes later, I got the phone call that my brother had died. And I can tell you that in all of the witnesses, the physical cards, the words, the lantern that someone gave me for his light to continue, the azalea bush that will blossom and I'll think of him, all of those physical things spoke to me deeply of God's love. If you've been there, you'll understand. And I understand that and I've said it, that at times people will say, I'm sorry, especially at this time of year. But it's precisely this time of year that is so important. Certainly my brother was the first one that loved me and showed me, my older brother showed me what love was. Certainly, Christmas is the time when we rejoice in the fact that God so loved us that he sends people to surround us and things to remind us and places of worship to come. And I'll tell you, I've learned another thing about grief, that grief is really love. We need Christmas, especially now. Howard Thurman is a black theologian and a mystic who has written brilliantly, especially about the mood of Christmas. And this is what he says about the Christmas and what it's offering us. The symbol of Christmas, what is it? It's a rainbow arched over the roof of the sky when the clouds are heavy with foreboding. We've seen a few of those, haven't we, in the last few days? It's the cry of life in the newborn babe. When forced from its mother's nest, it claims its right to live. It is the brooding presence of the eternal Spirit which make crooked paths straight and rough places smooth, and tired hearts refreshed, and dead hopes stir with newness of life. It is the promise of tomorrow at the end of the day. Oh, I love that. The promise of tomorrow at the end of the day. And the movement on life in defiance of death, and the assurance that love is sturdier than hate, that right is more confident than wrong, and that good is more permanent ever than evil. We need the incarnation now more than ever. We need to claim the love that is there for us and to live it out. Because God works in love, and God's love works in the flesh. We need people who will take hot spots in the world and make them hope spots. Incarnation. Someone said there are two types of people that could change the world. There are those that would change the world, but they can't. They don't have the way, the vote, the money. They said that there are those that should change the world, but they won't because of woundedness or meanness. I think they're wrong. I don't think there are two types of people that could change the world. I think there are three. There are those that could change it, but won't. There are those that would change it, but they can't. And then there's three. Then there's you. Merry Christmas.